Good morning, fellow gamers. This is Chris with Roll With It, and this is just an episode I'm doing solo today. Nate is running a one-shot for our regular gaming group tonight, plus one potential new player and possibly Jaren as well. And he has asked us to create new characters for this one-shot. It'll be Christmas themed, and we are going to be recording it to air it probably sometime next week. So it is, again, Christmas themed, so be looking for an announcement about when that's going to go up. Yeah, so I thought I'd do one more character creation video. This time I'm doing a screen share so I can show you how to fill out the character sheet. So let's get started. So Nate instructed us to do 5th level characters, and we get to use either standard array or point by for this session. All the modifiers and other things that 5th edition has, I just haven't felt the need to go with a point by, and I think it creates a little more temptation to min-max, and you know, my characters always turn out fine. So for this one, I decided that I really wanted to play test the Unearthed Arcana Druid, or that came out, I think, a week or two ago. And so that's this. You can find this at the Dungeons and Dragons Wizards of the Coast official website. I was really intrigued. There's 3 new circles with this, and one of them is Circle of the Twilight, which is druids that seek to exterminate undead creatures. So I know that Nate has undead in his world. We may be dealing with that in this episode or this session. So I decided to give it a play test, ran it by Nate, and he was all for it. The other thing is I'm also going to try out a race that's in Volo's Guide to Monsters that I was intrigued by, and that's the Furbolg. So you can find the information about the Furbolg on pages 106 and 107 of Volo's Guide. So these are creatures that naturally tend to be druids anyway. They live in the forest, they kind of keep to themselves, and they disguise themselves when they go out in public. And so I just really wanted to do something a little different, and so I thought I would try this out. They do have a couple special abilities. They do have some magic that they can automatically do, and then they have a special trait called Hidden Step. We can magically turn invisible until the start of the next turn, or until you attack, making a damage roll or force someone to make a saving throw. So that's pretty cool, and I think it fits really well with the hunting the undead. You would need to have some advantages, so that's really cool. So I'm going to do the screen share of the character sheet and show you how I go about filling out a character sheet. I have already filled in a couple things. So the first thing I always do when I create a character, I like to choose my class and race, and so we've discussed that. I'm going with Druid. My Druid circle is Circle of Twilight, and I'm a Furbolg. They tend to be naturally neutral good characters, which is perfect because that's all I ever play. Maybe someday I'll branch out, but right now that's it. So I've already filled in my class and level, my background, my player name, etc., and my experience points. We'll come back to the background here in a little bit. The first thing I do, in addition to choosing those things, when it comes to actually filling out the character sheet, is I go to this far left section of the character sheet and I start filling in my racial abilities. So you have these abilities: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And each race typically has different modifiers for that. I got, for being a Furbolg, I got +1 to strength and +2 to wisdom. So I've already written those in because those get added to your actual ability scores. And then you will have your modifiers that you have to add to that when you make rolls using those abilities. I have decided on my numbers already. So what I do is I go through and I find all my racial and class traits, and I start to fill them in. And so I've done a lot of that already, just to make this go faster. But and then I usually do all the other class and race stuff and then come back and assign my numbers last. But since I already have them worked out, I'm going to go ahead and fill those in. Druids should typically have their wisdom as their highest score and their constitution as their second highest score. The highest score in the standard array is a 15. So I'm assigning that to my wisdom, and I already have +2, so that's giving me a base score of 17 in my ability there. And then the second highest number is 14. Now I don't have any other things bumping up my constitution, so that's just a straight 14. The next number is a 13, and I've decided to assign that to Dex. As a undead fighter, and with some of the things I've chosen, I feel that Dex is going to be important for my character. So that's the reason for the 13 there. And then I decided to go with 12 for my strength, and with that +1, that bumps it to 13. Then the next number in the array is 10, and I'm assigning that to my intelligence. And last but not least, I'm assigning 8 to charisma. I have to admit that I tend to assign charisma low really often. I always seem to feel that other scores are more important, but in this case, it really fits. The Furbolg is described as being a race that live in the forest and they keep to themselves. So they definitely would not be very charismatic as far as society goes. So I think that's a really good fit for me, no problem. Next thing is you're going to look at your saving throws and any skills that you get with your character. And I have several that I could choose from. So saving throws is in your second column over. You'll see inspiration and your proficiency bonus, which by the way at 5th level is +3. It bumps up at 5th from +2 to +3. So I've got that filled in already. Anyway, then you have this list: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, charisma, and it says saving throws at the bottom of the box. This partially depends on which character sheet you use. I'm using the form-fillable full 3-page version that you can get from Wizards of the Coast on their website for free. It's actually a whole zip file that has several different versions, so the one, again, that I've chosen is the full 3-page. So anyway, you just fill in those circles. What this means is when you go to assign those numbers, you get to add your proficiency bonus to it. Same goes for these skills, acrobatics, animal handling, etc. And you'll notice in parentheses that each of those has a skill attached to it: dex, wisdom, etc. So you're going to use those, assign those modifiers to these traits. But if you have a proficiency in any of those, you have these circles filled in, then you're going to be able to add a proficiency bonus to that as well. So I had several that I got to choose from just for being a druid. And then I had a couple that came with my background, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I'm just going to go ahead and fill those in. So I have athletics, insight, perception, and survival. So I felt that being a Furbolg, being a creature who lives in the forest, and kind of being a druid especially, they spend a lot of time out in nature, so survival seems to me to be a no-brainer. Perception also seems to be a really good natural fit, which I'm sure is why it was amongst the things that I could choose from. These are both things that I chose and were not assigned. And the thing is that if I'm dealing with the undead, I felt that perception was probably more important than some of the other things I could choose from, such as animal handling or nature, medicine. In addition, this character, I didn't feel that I wanted to go into a support role. This is an independent character who is out, you know, hunting down the undead, presumably solo up until this point of, you know, joining up with this group tonight. So I feel that the perception, again, really makes sense, and it really fits with where I'm trying to go with my character. Athletics and survival came with my background, and survival was also something I could have chosen. But because it was assigned, once I got my background figured out, I was able to go back and kind of repick. So I went with insight instead of survival for my other skill that I got to choose from for being a druid. And then the athletics and the survival came with my background. So I've got those filled in. And passive wisdom, so actually let's skip down to there. So below the skills and the ability scores is this passive wisdom. And I feel like I always get this wrong, but I believe it's 10 plus your wisdom modifier. Wisdom is, of course, what's attached to your perception. So, and I just realized that we didn't fill those in. So speaking of those modifiers, let's go back and take care of those now that all of these scores are filled in, and that will allow us to finish out these other scores over here. So on page 13 of your player handbook for 5th edition, you will find in the top right-hand corner the ability score modifiers. So these are based on this base score. So you'll notice that for every 2, there's a different modifier. So with a 13, I get a +1 in strength, and also a +1 for my dex. With a 14, I get a +2 to my constitution, which is great because that's going to play into my hit points here in a minute that we'll talk about. With a score of 10, I do not get any modifier to my intelligence. 17 gives me a +3 to my wisdom, which is really great because that's my spell casting. And charisma with 8 is actually a -1. And that's fine because this character, again, is going to be kind of socially inept as far as what's typical, you know, in civilized society, in communities and things. Going back to the passive wisdom then, 10 plus 3 gives me a passive wisdom or passive perception of 13. It's just how perceptive are you naturally. And then this perception over here in your skills is how perceptive are you when you're really actively on the lookout for things. So we might as well fill in these skills. So over here, saving throw for strength is just going to be equal to my strength modifier +1. Same for dex, same for constitution +2. So, but my intelligence again is my proficiency plus the modifier. Since I had a 0 modifier there, that means I get just my perception, which is +3, and that's not bad. So my wisdom, I have a +3. I get to add my proficiency bonus, giving me +6, which is awesome. And of course, my charisma is -1. And then going down the line, you're just going to fill these in. So we'll do a few, and we'll do a couple of the ones that I'm proficient in, and you'll get the idea, and I'll fill the rest in later. So acrobatics is dex-based. I'm going to get a +1 there. Animal handling is wisdom-based. I'm getting a +3, which is great because that also plays into one of the traits that we'll talk about in a little bit. Arcana or Arcana, depending on how you prefer to pronounce it, is going to be +0 because I have it's based on intelligence. So coming to athletics then, I get my proficiency bonus plus my strength modifier. So that's going to give me a +4. So again, my proficiency bonus is +3 and my strength is +1. And let's jump down and do this insight one just to do one more. So again, it's my wisdom score plus my proficiency score. So that's giving me a +6 because they're both 3. So that's pretty good. Anyway, you get the idea of how those go. The constitution score also plays into your hit points. So I get a D8 for my hit points. When you start at level 1, you get the full value of that hit die. So if my hit die is a a D8. That means it's an 8-sided die, and at first level I would get the full 8 points, plus you get to add your Constitution modifier. So if this were 1, I'd be starting with 10 hit points. Because Nate is starting us at 5th level, he's given us some instructions for how to do that and how to build our hit points from there. In 5th edition, they have an average, and the average for a D8 is a 5. So he's instructed us to take full HP for level 1 and then the average for each additional level. So again, my base would be 10, and then I'd get 5 for each additional level, so 4 levels, that's 20. And then my Constitution modifier is +2, so I'm adding an additional 10 to that. So I came out with a total hit point of 38. So my creature is a medium-sized creature with a speed of 30, which is pretty much the standard. There's very few things that get a bonus there. Some of the things that I have right off the bat with this character, you're going to read through for your proficiencies in languages, and some of those are going to come from your race, some of those are going to come from your class, and sometimes you get additional things with your background as well. So for me, my languages, and you're going to fill these out in this box at the far left on the bottom under the column that had all of your skills. So it says other proficiencies in languages, so that's where I always fill those in. So I get Common, Elvish, and Giant. So Furbolgs are sort of a giant type creature. I also get Druidic, and my background gave me an additional language, and I've chosen Orcish. So I am proficient with light armor, medium armor, and shields. However, as a druid, druids do not use metal. So these would always be wood or leather or some sort of natural material, but never metal. So I'm going to make that note there. I am proficient in clubs, daggers, darts, javelins, maces, quarterstaffs, scimitars, sickles, slings, and spears. So those are all the things that I'm proficient in. That means that these are things I could choose from, and my proficiency bonus would come into play when wielding them or using them, and or in the case of armor, it kind of more explains what you're allowed to wear. In the case of your weapons, these are the weapons then that you can choose from, and when you use them, your proficiency bonus will apply to your attack damage, your attack bonus, and often to your damage as well. With that in mind, because I chose Circle of the Twilight and decided to go with this undead hunter type character, I decided crossbow was a really great way to go. But I'm kind of thinking of Faith from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, if you're familiar. I like the idea of a crossbow having a little bit of a range against undead, having something that is stake-like and potentially wood, so that, you know, which would be good against, obviously, vampires, as well as just having, again, that range to be able to work with. So I did go with that. So my attack bonus for that, it's a ranged weapon, so Dex is going to play into my attack bonus here, and of course my proficiency bonus applies. So my Dex modifier is +1, and again my proficiency is +3, so that gives me a +4 to hit. The damage on this is 1d8, and it's piercing damage, which I always like to note. So the range is kind of interesting on these weapons, but basically you get 2 ranges. Oh, I didn't write that down right. It's 80 and 320. What that means is you know, I guess your ideal range would be at least, you know, 80 feet away, but you could go up to 320, and there's not room for that on the sheet, so I guess I won't fill that in. At 320, I believe that you do have a disadvantage to hit, but if you had to, you could try to take something out at very long range. I also decided to go with a quarterstaff, and here's my thinking here. One is that bludgeoning damage can be very, very handy when dealing with the undead, which is something that a character dealing with the undead would know. Bludgeoning damage weapons are very, very handy, particularly against skeletons. It can be very handy with things like zombies. And then it's a versatile weapon, so you can use it in a couple different ways. You can use it single-handed or dual-handed, and it does more if you use two hands. So I felt that was pretty handy, and I also felt that, I guess in a pinch, if you had to, you could probably manage to stab a vampire with a staff. Maybe not so much, but the other thing is that being a creature of the forest, it would just look like a walking stick, and a walking stick really fits in, I feel, with the character profile. So I went with quarterstaff, and I noticed it's not going to let me fit all of that in, but that's okay. So again, looking at attack bonuses. So you're going to find this information, by the way, on page 149, which is your list of weapons. And when you look at that list, you will see what type of weapon it is, what its properties are, and that gives you an idea. Now, in this case, part of this is thinking about, you know, is it something that you have to aim and have some skill with? So a crossbow, you have to load it, your fingers need to be nimble, and you're shooting at range, so it's, you know, throwing or aiming, and dex is what comes into play there. With a quarterstaff, you're hitting things with it, so your strength is what's going to be the modifier here. So again, I have +1 strength, and my proficiency bonus is +3, and it does apply, so it's another +4. Now in this case, it's a 1d6 or a 1d8, depending on whether I use it with 2 hands or 1. And so I'm putting a V there next to it to remind me that it's versatile. In addition to that, my character at 5th level at 4th level, you get ability score improvement. You have the option to either take the ability score improvement or take a feat. And I decided to take the feat Crossbow Expert. And what this feat does, and you will find, by the way, the feats starting on page 165 of the player handbook. And Crossbow Expert is actually right on that same page. And what this is it means that your character has had extensive practice with the crossbow and you are proficient in it. I took Crossbow Expert. And what this means is I ignore the loading quality of the crossbows with which I am proficient, and this is page 165. You, if you're within 5 feet of a hostile creature, it does not impose a disadvantage on your ranged attack rolls. So even if that creature's at close range, you have no disadvantage in trying to attack with that weapon. And when you use the attack action with a one-handed weapon, so if I'm using my quarterstaff, it's a versatile weapon. I can use it one-handed or two-handed. If I go with one-handed, then I can use a bonus action to also attack with my crossbow. So that is really, really great. So I took that feat. The other thing that I have here is something that comes with my Druid Circle. The Circle of the Twilight gives me an ability called Harvest's Scythe. Harvest Scythe. And what this is starting at 2nd level, you learn to unravel and harvest the life energy of other creatures. You can augment your spells to drain the life force from creatures. And what it does is it gives you a pool of energy represented by a number of d10s equal to your druid level. So for me, at this point, it's going to be 5 d10s, which I'm including here. However, that's my pool. When I roll damage for the spell, I can increase that number by spending dice from this pool, and I can spend dice equal to half of my druid level or less. So I can use 2 d10s right now, equal to half your druid. Roll the spent dice and add them to the damage as necrotic damage. If you kill 1 or more hostile creatures with a spell augmented in this way, you or an ally of your choice that you can see within 30 feet of you regains 2 hit points per die spent. So right now I'd be limited to 2 at a time, but even so, that's 2 hit points that can either go back to me or go to another party member. It's 5 hit points if at least one of the slain creatures was undead. So if I hit an undead and I use this ability, my companions or myself could get 10 hit points back in one go with this. And I regain the expended dice when I finish a long rest. I could use one d10 each time from my pool, and I could use it 5 times, 5 different times on 5 different turns, or I could use 2 at a time, and that would give me 3 opportunities to use it, because I'd use 2 and then 2, and the last time would be 1. So this is a pretty neat little skill. There's other skills I would get at higher levels, but since they don't apply, I'm not going to cover them right now. For my background, I chose Outlander. So again, the Furbolgs are, creatures that keep to themselves. The Outlander background fit really well. I actually did modify it a little bit, partially because of the undead aspect I have, and some of the things in the Outlander background didn't really fit. And you are more than welcome to customize those. You actually don't even have to use the ones from the book. You can build your own. But I find that the ones in the book really help me to be a little more focused and make a little more sense out of what I'm doing. And more often than not, even if I don't want to use everything from that background, I'm often able to find something from another background that will fit where I feel there's a missing piece. Or sometimes I'll just change some words around to make it fit exactly my vision. You can find the Outlander background on page 136 of the Player Handbook. And basically the Outlander is someone who grew up in the wild, far from civilization and the comforts of town and technology. Totally perfect fit for this Furbolg and for a druid, so it works really great all the way around. And so skills proficiencies was the athletics and survival that I mentioned earlier. I also get a tool proficiency of 1 type of musical instrument, and I'm just going to go with a simple wooden flute. I got to choose 1 language, which is how I ended up with Orcish. And then for the equipment, I got a staff, a hunting trap, a trophy from an animal I killed, which I have not decided on. To fit the Twilight Circle a little bit better, I'll probably pick a trophy from an undead creature as opposed to an animal. I have a set of traveler's clothes and a belt pouch containing 10 gold. Some features on this. So features, I always list over here in features and traits. I've already filled in the things that came with the Furbolg. As a druid, I get ritual casting and then I also get wild shape as a druid. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But one thing that I get with this Outlander background is Wanderer. You'll find that, again, it's on page 136 with the rest of with the beginning of the Outlander background. But what this does is it gives me an excellent memory for maps and geography. I can always recall the general layout of terrain, settlements, and other features around me. And I think that really fits well. This is a person who's not paying a lot of attention to people and what's going on with people, but they would pay attention to the environment all the time. So I really feel like that's a great fit. In addition, you can find food, fresh water for yourself and up to 5 other people each day, as long as it's available in the land, whether it's game, berries, water, etc. As long as we're talking about these features and traits, let's back up real quick to wild shape. So druid characters get to change shapes into animals. But this new Unearthed Arcana build, or list of options, I should say, these are not set in stone yet. Again, they are just here for the purpose of testing right now, play testing, and then we'll see what they come up with for a final. But in this one, they suggest that you figure out what climate you may have come from, and use that to determine what your choices are as creature. I've decided to go with temperate forest. Your starting beast shapes at 2nd level for temperate are cat, elk, and wolf. And here's their thinking behind it. Each of them gives you an option for combat, climbing, stealth, and serving as a mount. So you could ride the elk, you could, cats climb well, wolves are really scrappy. So these are all really, really great. Cats and wolves are probably also both very stealthy. And even an elk is probably fairly quiet moving through the forest. So that's what I went with for temperate. At 4th level, they have black bear, crab, frog, octopus, poisonous snake, reef shark, seahorse, warhorse, etc. So there are other things to choose from. So this also has some ideas about gaining additional shapes based on things that you see in nature, things that you observe, things that you come across in your explorations. And that's something I really like. It's actually something I've done with my character Shay just naturally, and Nate and I have worked that out. But I think it's interesting that they went that way. I just think it's really logical, and I hope it's something that they'll keep in the game, because I think it's really cool. Let's finish up with some of the things. So I went with the following personality traits. Up here in the far right-hand upper portion of the page, you have these boxes to fill in for personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. You should always pick 2 personality traits as according to the player's handbook. You could probably pick even that, but you really shouldn't pick less. And that's because your personality is made up of a lot more than just one thing. And to kind of have a well-rounded character, you need a couple to really help you, bring your character into focus as you're playing. So I went with, I am far more comfortable around animals and trees than people. I'm oblivious to etiquette and social expectations. I pulled that one from the hermit background because it just fit better than a lot of the personality traits that were offered for Outlander. For my ideals, I went with the natural world is more important than all the constructs of civilization. For bonds, I had to customize a little bit. And so I went with, it is my duty to eradicate undead creatures from the natural world. And then I also went with an injury to the wilderness as an injury to me. And finally, for my flaw, I'm slow to trust other races, tribes, and societies. All right, so those are some of the basic things. Those are all filled in. So now we're going to jump down to equipment. There are several things based on 3 different things that you draw on: your race, your class, and your background that I get. So I get an herbalism kit. That's part of Druid. I decided 5th level, so Nate didn't give us really any guidelines for money. But he just said, kind of get what you want, but don't go wild. And so I decided to upgrade, that my character has upgraded their armor from leather, which I automatically got with one of my things. But I decided that this character would have purchased some hide armor. And so the hide armor gives me an armor class of 12. And then so if you go to your armor page, which is page 145 of the player handbook, you've got your armor. Oh yeah, I did do it right. So it's when you look at the chart, you go to the type of armor you want. So I selected hide. You follow it across, and the armor class column says what the base is and what modifier you add to it. It happens to be the dex, and it's a max of 2, so it's perfect because I'm not going to exceed that max. So it was 12, and my dex is +1, so my armor class is 13, which I've already filled in here. She also gets a druidic focus. I get an explorer's pack, and I think this is an important tip. Always, always, always list what's in your pack. Almost every build comes with some sort of pack. It's a really great way that 5th edition has simplified the process of what to get and what you're going to carry on you. It's one thing I really, really like about 5th edition. Back in 2nd edition, you actually had to shop and figure out everything. Your DM had to decide how much money you started out with, and then you had to spend that money and purchase what you wanted, and then you ended up with what you were left with. But it was a lot of stuff that you really had to put a lot of thought into, and this just really, really simplifies it. And I find that it's rare that it's not enough. Once in a while there are additional things I do want, and I discuss it with my my game master. But anyway, do list these out, because it really, really helps later in the game when you're trying to figure out, what do I have, what can I use in a situation. Say somebody falls down a cliff and you want to retrieve them. If you know whether or not you have a rope, it's pretty handy, and it's nice not to have to go back to the book. So this comes with a backpack, a bedroll, a mess kit, of course, which is what you use to eat, with a tinder box, which is great for starting a fire, 10 torches, 10 days rations. I get a water skin. I think everybody carries a water skin. So this also comes with 50 feet of hempen rope attached to the side of your pack. So it's tied onto your pack rather than inside it. Now, because I went with a crossbow, I am definitely going to need ammunition. My character has 2 quivers, and that's a total of 40 bolts for my crossbow. Then again, I got a musical instrument, so I went with a flute, and gave me a staff, which I already had, a hunting trap, a trophy, which again I'm going to discuss with Nate, traveler's clothes, and that's actually where my belt pouch and gold came from. So not my pack. So these are the basic things in the character sheet. Hopefully this has been informative for you. Oh, I did forget to fill in my character's name. So the description about the Furbolg says that they just typically will take an elven name if they have to be subjected to society, if they're going to go out in public. They don't place a lot of importance on names because creatures that they come into contact with, you know, don't go by names. They're just cat, dog, elk, fern. So I decided to go with the name Ilenia and only a first name. And moving on, I'm going to skip right past the description piece because that's not as important, but page 2 does give you a place to, again, list your name, fill in your age, height, weight, etc., your general appearance things. It's a place to list any allies or organizations that you're part of. So then we come to the spellcasting page. So my spellcasting ability is my wisdom +3 for my spellcasting ability. My spell save DC. So how this works is this is 8 plus your proficiency plus your wisdom modifier. So it's a base of 11 at this level plus my wisdom of 3. So I have 11 plus 3 is 14. So what that is when someone has to save against my spell, they need to get a 14 or higher. My spell attack bonus is proficiency plus my wisdom modifier. And so again, it's 3 plus 4, so I get a +7 on my spell attack bonus. So I'm going to shoot back up to the first page. And here where we filled in weapons, I'm going to put spells. I'm going to put +7 because I'm always forgetting about my spell. And then I'm just going to write special because I'm going to look at the spells for the actual damage. But this hopefully will help me to remember to add +7. So shooting back down to the spell page, I get 3 cantrips to start, and I have decided to go with Produce Flame, Shillelagh. I went with Thorn Whip. So when it comes to the spells for this character, I decided that because of the more reclusive nature of this race, and because of the fact that I went with the Circle of Twilight and this undead, again, I said I feel that this character is more independent, maybe more of a solo adventurer, or has been maybe up to this point. So this character, I decided to steer away from supportive spells. I do have some healing spells because you always need to heal, whether it's yourself or others. So most of these spells are going to be things that actually help me do damage or protect me or help me heal myself. And that may extend to others if my character decides that that's advantageous. So I get 4 first level spells. So Cure Wounds, I went with Entangle, which is kind of a pet spell of mine that I really like. I went with Fairy Fire, thinking about the undead and advantages they may have. I thought the Fairy Fire might be really handy. And I went with Thunder Wave because I want to be able to do damage to those critters. And then finally, at on second level spells, I get 3, and I went with Find Traps. I went with Flame Blade. So fire can be very, very effective against undead, and this is a really great spell. You can find all of these spells in the player handbook. I'm not going to explain them in detail, but this one's pretty cool. And last but not least, I decided to go with Spike Growth. This is a really cool spell, and it gives an opportunity for me to do a couple really creative things. So these are the spells I went with. So I hope you found this episode of Roll With It informative. I hope you find your way around the character sheet a little more easily for this instruction. And if you have any comments, input, insight, advice, even for me, feel free to add that to the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And please don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Also, please do subscribe and share so that you can catch all of our future videos as well. And don't forget to keep an eye out for that airing date for this one-shot. We are playing it tonight. We will be recording it, but again, we don't have the airing date yet, but it will be sometime next week before Christmas. So until next time, may the dice roll in your favor. Bye.